Hello there, and welcome to Unveil Your Brilliance with Angilie Kapoor here on the Win-Win Women TV network, where each week we explore helping you to break free from the illusions that are holding you back. My name is Angilie Kapoor. I am a conscious leadership coach, a best-selling multi-book author, and inspirational speaker, as well as your host. I'm also the founder of Oversight Global, my coaching company, where myself and my team are on a mission to address the consciousness crisis in the world, one leader at a time. We all have the capacity to be a superhero. In order to become one, you just have to find your unique power or ability and exploit it for the greater good. The cape and mask are optional accessories, but a kind heart is essential. Now, this is a quote from Robert Clancy, who is a #1 international best-selling author, spiritual teacher, and award-winning creative visionary. Now, as always, I'd like to share a quote with you that relates to the topic of our episode discussions, and this week is no different. On today's episode, we have an amazing guest joining us to share her experience and insights on the unique gifts and challenges of high sensory perception for women. We'll discuss how embracing your heightened perceptiveness can help you thrive both professionally and personally. And before I bring her on again, just a friendly reminder to keep a lookout for our episode segments, our show pillars, which we make sure we touch on each week. And they are brilliant mindset, breaking free, and brilliant strategies during our discussion. So without further ado, let's go ahead and welcome our special guest for today, certified leadership and executive coach, mastermind facilitator, and author Rachel Radway onto the show. Now, I am so thrilled to have our guest for today here with us. Now, before I bring her on, let me tell you a bit more about her. Now, Rachel Radway is a certified leadership and executive coach, mastermind facilitator, and author of Perceptive, which is coming out in 2025. With 25 plus years of leadership experience in tech startups and Fortune 500s, she's passionate about helping leaders who are wired a little differently start thriving professionally and personally. Highly perceptive herself, Rachel has faced all the challenges that come with high sensory perception, along with the gifts. She loves seeing her clients light up as they learn more about their brain's different wiring, start to embrace their superpowers, and redesign aspects of their work and life to better align with their values and goals. Now, whether navigating a transition or learning to say no more often, communicate more effectively, advocate for themselves, or negotiate for better outcomes, Rachel's clients have called her one on one coaching and small group programs life changing. So get ready to be inspired and empowered, ladies, as we welcome to the show Rachel Radway. Rachel, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to Unveil Your Brilliance.
Thank you for having me, Angilie. It's great to talk with you.
All right. So let's go ahead and first kind of define for the ladies who might be watching who aren't really familiar with the term high sensory perception. So can you kind of just help us understand a little bit better what that is?
Sure. And it can be really confusing because there are a lot of different terms that sort of mean the same thing. Basically, it means people who are highly sensitive to various things in their environment. It could be physical stimuli like lights or sound or textures or food, alcohol, caffeine is the other one I was trying to think of, lots of different kinds of stimuli. It
Mhm.
can also be people who are more sensitive to energies and to emotions.
Okay.
And this is sometimes known as high sensitivity. I call it high sensory perception because there can be a stigma associated with the word sensitivity, and
Mhm.
it's actually not a weakness or a vulnerability like a lot of people think it is. It's actually a superpower. But perceptiveness is something that definitely has a positive connotation and something that we're born with. And people that have this trait are constantly perceiving more information. So it's an apt description.
Sounds good. So the two words that kind of came up for me while you were explaining that are empath and introvert. So
Mhm.
are these related at all? How do they kind of fit in with the definition of high sensory perception?
So great questions. I'm actually writing about this now for the book. I'll start with empath. So
Okay.
there are a lot of books on empaths and what an empath is. And there are also some different theories about what empaths are. There are some people who feel very strongly that empath is kind of its own category and that empaths are separate from every other, kind of sensitivity.
Hmm.
I disagree with that. I actually think that empaths are very sensitive to emotions and to potentially physical feelings as well. There are some empaths who can walk into a room and start feeling nausea or a headache or a sore throat or something else when they were feeling fine before they walked into the room. And it is actually that they are picking up someone else's feelings or
Hmm.
emotions. To me, so I think about sensitivity in terms of, if you know this old sound mixing board,
Yeah.
probably not old, probably they're still using them. But each one of those channels that you can dial up or down is
Hmm.
a different kind of sensitivity. And everybody is on that board somewhere. You may only be sensitive to one or two things, or you may be sensitive to a lot of things.
Right.
So I think of empaths as kind of a subcategory of highly sensitive people. They are very highly sensitive, and empaths may or may not be sensitive to other things like the lights or the sound or the alcohol or the caffeine and the other
Hmm.
things I mentioned.
Hmm.
Introversion and extroversion is a slightly different kind of trait. So I think of introversion as people who need to be on their own to recharge their batteries. So extroverts recharge by having social interaction,
Right.
and they need that social interaction to really keep their energy up.
Hmm.
Introverts, it's not necessarily that they are antisocial or that they don't want that social interaction,
Hmm.
but they have a rich inner life and they recharge by being on their own. So, research on highly sensitive people and highly perceptive people has shown that 70% of them of us, I should say, are introverts, which means there are still 30% who are extroverts. And that 30%, I'll take a step back and say that more research has shown that about 30% of the population are highly perceptive or have high sensory perception.
Okay.
So it's 30% of 30% who are that extroverted group. And
Mm.
they can sometimes have challenges because they know that they want to be around other people. They know that they get energized by social interaction. And yet, like other highly perceptive and high sensory people, they need more downtime,
Right.
sometimes before, sometimes after. So life can be a little confusing for them until they learn that they're actually extroverted, high sensory folks.
Okay. Okay. So you mentioned that people are kind of born with having this type of perceptiveness. So can it kind of change throughout your life and as you mature and go through different experiences? Have you noticed that with any of your clients?
So definitely it can change. I've noticed this with myself. I've noticed it with clients. I've also been doing a lot of research on this for the book that I'm working on.
Hmm.
And there are a number of different things that I think can affect sensitivity. So researchers do believe that there is a basis in genetics and in neurobiology.
Okay.
That said, there are other things in our lives that can affect how sensitive we are. Some of them on a cyclical basis. So the amount of sleep that you're getting can affect how sensitive you are. Your hormonal cycle, especially for women, can
Hmm.
affect sensitivity. I know that there are certain times of the month where I'm more sensitive to pain, for example.
Hmm.
There is a lot of work being done in the area of trauma and sensitivity. And because it has to do with the wiring in your brain, certain kinds of trauma can make people more sensitive.
Hmm.
My understanding, and I'm not an expert in this particular area of it, is that the sensitivity that comes from the trauma is not the same as the sensitivity that some people are born with.
Okay.
But you could see how somebody who is born with high sensory perception might be even more affected with trauma. And in fact, research has shown that high sensory people react more strongly to all kinds of experiences, whether they're positive experiences or negative
Hmm.
experiences. So does that help?
Yeah, no, it does actually. Actually, when you're just talking about trauma, for me, I'm also highly sensitive. I'm also an empath and an introvert.
Mhm.
And so
Me too.
I know that for me, I did not recognize that I was an empath until I had a really big trauma in my life. I got laid off from a job. And that's when that switch kind of just switched over. And then I started to feel all kinds of other people's emotions and feel waves of energy hitting me when I went into these big groups.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, yeah, that really rings true for an experience that I've had. So, yeah, I can definitely relate to that. So, kind of getting back to you being highly perceptive as well, how did you kind of, begin to recognize that? And then how did you kind of get into the work that you do and helping, other people in the workplace be able to deal with the challenges that come with having that type of gift?
It's definitely been a journey, Angilie. I knew when I was a child that I was highly sensitive,
Hmm.
and things like sound. Sound is a big one for me. I could not be around loud, noisy things. Even now, when the landscapers are outside my window, it drives me nuts with the
Yeah,
power tools going on. I, like many, many, many people with this trait, was always told you're too sensitive. You need to get a thicker skin, because I was sensitive emotionally as well as, and energetically, as well as to physical stimuli. But I always thought it was just me. And I just thought it was something that I had to get used to, and I had to make decisions about my life to ensure that the conditions that I surrounded myself with were healthy for me.
right.
About 20 years or so ago, I came across the book called The Highly Sensitive Person, written by a psychologist named Elaine Aron. She published it in the late 1990s.
Okay.
The book was a revelation to me, because it talks about the fact that up to 30% of that, I think she was saying at the time it was 15 to 20%, but research now shows it's up to 30% of the population has this trait. And the fact that, there were other people like me was amazing. And I took it all in. I didn't relate to every single piece of the way she described things, and I'll get back to that in a minute, but it made a really big impact on me.
Hmm.
And then promptly I forgot about it. And I think this happens with things that we're not really ready for,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
About a year ago, a little over a year ago, I had launched my coaching business. I was working with women leaders, and I was in a boot camp designed for people who were creating masterminds, which is something that I also facilitate.
Hmm.
I was dealing with some of the questions in my head one night after the boot camp had ended, and I wanted to watch something on Netflix and just sort of, space out a little bit. And up came a documentary that I started watching. It was called Sensitive, and I realized that it had been based on that book.
Mm.
A series of events then happened that reminded me. I reread the book. I started digging more deeply into it, and it reminded me of all of the things that had come up in my life. And then I looked back on the past, 20 years since I had first read the book.
Hmm.
And that's, I think, when it really started to sink in. Then I also looked at all of the clients that I had been working with up until that point, and realized that almost every single one of them actually was highly sensitive or highly perceptive as well.
Oh,
Even if
wow.
most of them really didn't identify that way, they didn't know the language or the terms, but they all, like I had, knew that their brain was wired a little bit differently, and thought that they were alone in the way
Hmm.
they thought and felt. And
Right.
so one of the biggest joys in my coaching is helping women understand, all clients, but I work most of the time with women, helping them learn about the way their brain is wired, and understand for the first time that they're not alone, they're not crazy, they're not broken.
Hmm.
There are a lot of us out there. So it's something I'm really, really passionate about.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Have you found any type of research that indicates if there are more, the population of women, that there are more women who are more highly sensitive?
It's interesting. The research says that it's pretty much equal, 50-50, or
Mm.
or across genders. So no, it doesn't affect any one gender specifically more than
Okay.
others. What I have seen in terms of the research that I've done, the clients I've worked with, the people I've talked with, is the trait itself seems to affect people in many of the same ways across the board.
Hmm.
Responses to it, of course, can be a little different. And a lot of that is socially based, societally based, culturally based. So, for example, I've talked with a lot of clients in corporate, both women and men.
Hmm.
And one of the ways that this trait shows up
Hmm.
is that we are downloading a lot of information. Our brains are subconsciously processing a ton of information at a time. And I think the figures are somewhere around the typical brain is processing subconsciously or unconsciously about 11 million pieces of information. I want to say per second, don't quote me on that, but it's a lot. We only consciously can process about 40 to 50 of those pieces of information.
Mm-hmm.
People who are highly perceptive are actually, we have fewer filters than most.
Right.
So we're processing more of those bits of information every second than people with more filters.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means is that we are making a lot of connections because we are getting all of these different things. We're processing all of this information more deeply. One of the most common traits that I find among people who are highly perceptive is we are making connections among that information more than other people are. And we can often use it to see several steps ahead. I had one client who talks about her Sherlock Holmes abilities, and she's always sort of following the clues, and she sees these things and these patterns before other people do. That trait seems to be pretty universal among people who are highly perceptive.
Mm-hmm.
Another piece that comes with it is because we can see several steps ahead, which is great for strategic thinking, we get really frustrated when, for example, an executive makes a strategic decision. We see for some reason that it's not going to work the way they think it is.
Right.
We want to raise feedback about it, and we're not listened to because, of course, where did we get that information from, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's something that's common to everybody. What seems to be different is some of the other pieces of the trait. A lot of the women, for example, that I work with are really looking for community. They want to talk with other women who are dealing with this trait and the challenges and the gifts that come with it. And they want to talk about it and learn from each other and share their experiences. And I've talked to several men who have the trait, and they're not as interested in forming that community. So it's there, we all have it, or 30% of us have it, but we deal with it in different ways.
Yeah. That doesn't surprise me about men. If they have something that's different about them, they tend to want to go hide in the corner. So,
I've
but
seen that.
yeah, women want community. Yeah, I mean, they want to, this is different about me. I want to hear about other people's experience and challenges, and swap
Exactly.
notes and stuff like that. So yeah, I totally get that. So one of the things that came up for me when you were talking about the book that you read a long time ago that was written back in the 90s, and how her stats at the time was like only about 15% of people she found at that time did have this gift. But now, we're talking about this more like 70% of people. So
30%.
30%. Okay,
Yeah.
30% of people. Do you have any thoughts or feelings on, why that percentage has increased over the time?
So I think it's like a lot of things that are happening right now. I think a lot of it is just increased awareness and the way we are defining various terms. There is a website called sensitivityresearch.com that I believe they've worked directly with Dr. Aaron, and they also, research separately. And they've got their own assessment on that site. You can just go to sensitivityresearch.com if you want to take their assessment and see whether you qualify as highly sensitive or highly perceptive.
Mm-hmm.
They talk about it as a bell curve, which is a relatively flat bell curve, which is what you might expect. So if you think about the curve, about 30% would be in the top section, about 30% would be in the bottom section or not particularly sensitive. And then about 40% of the population would be somewhere in the middle, which kind of makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I also think as there is increased recognition and awareness of neurodiversity and what that means, and the fact that all of our brains work differently, there is more understanding and acceptance of the fact that some of us are different and we have different gifts and we have different challenges. And
Right.
so more people are learning about the trait and taking the assessments and working with it and talking about it.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So I'm sure ladies were probably like me when you were listing off some of the characteristics of being highly perceptive, and they're like, yeah, that's me. Oh, yeah, that's totally me. So how can some of the ladies find out? I mean, you just mentioned that they can go to a website and take an assessment and
Mhm.
find out if they happen to have the gift that way. But are there other ways that you would recommend that they find out if they're perceptive as well?
So there are a lot of different self-assessments out there, and I won't list all of them, but there are, you could Google it and you could find them. It's not something like ADHD or autism where you need to go to a healthcare provider to get an assessment. Many healthcare providers won't even know what you're talking about.
Hmm.
There's no diagnosis, there's no medication. It's not a disorder. It's not something that is wrong with you. And therefore, again, a lot of doctors are not even familiar with the term or the language around it or what it means.
Hmm.
There are a number of questions. You can even go to Elaine Aron's original site, which is hsperson.com. Her assessment is longer, and I think there are some simpler ones that you can take and shorter ones. But that's probably the best way. I mean, I think most people, if you have always struggled with any kind of sensitivity, so if sound has always been an issue for you, for example, or if you have a lot of food sensitivities, which I also have,
Hmm.
or if you cry easily at sad movies and identify with even fictional characters in books and plays and things like that. There are a lot of traits that are fairly easily identifiable as part of being highly perceptive and highly sensitive.
Hmm.
And it can be fun to take the assessments. It's not something that you need to do. It's some people have asked me, is it something that I need to disclose to my employer? It's not. It's really just something that is for your own understanding and growth. And also, I think we talked about this a little bit before. There was a study that was done several years ago by a couple of researchers that they called the orchids and the dandelions.
Yes.
And basically, the results of the study showed that this was done with children.
Hmm.
And obviously, highly perceptive and highly sensitive adults come from highly perceptive and highly sensitive children. What they found was that they called the sensitive and perceptive children the orchids,
Mm.
and the children who were really not particularly sensitive to anything, the dandelions. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because dandelions, as we all know, can grow anywhere. They really
Right.
don't need any special conditions to thrive. They're robust, they're hardy, they just love life, and they can grow wherever they want to.
Hmm.
Orchids, stunning and beautiful, and they give us a lot of value. And they need very specific conditions in which to thrive, right? So, what's of value for people in learning that they are wired this way is redesigning or realigning things in their life and work
Hmm.
to ensure that the conditions are favorable for you so that you can learn, there is a reason why I loved working at home during COVID, right? Because I could control my environment. I could control the lighting and to some extent the sound, and I could control, the chair that I'm sitting in, and I can take breaks when I want to, things like that. So there
Hmm.
are a lot of things that highly sensitive and highly perceptive people can do, again, to redesign their environment and make sure that it works for them.
Right, right. Yeah, no, I think you bring up a great point that, yeah, even though having high sensory perception isn't a medical diagnosis, there's nothing wrong with you medical. You don't need to disclose it to anybody. I think that if it's something that you do have characteristics of and are wondering and wanting to learn more about it, it's more about you becoming more self-aware, getting to know more about who you are so that, like you're saying, you can make the proper choices that you can make in order for you to be able to thrive in whatever environment that you're in. So, yeah, I think you make a great point with that. So, we are almost out of time. Can you please give us any final thoughts for the ladies who are watching this?
One of the things that comes up a lot, so many of the women, especially whom I work with, are givers, and they're high achievers and they're smart, but they tend to give everything they have to other
Hmm.
people, and they exhaust themselves, and they are really prone to burnout. And what I would say is one of the valuable things about knowing that you're highly sensitive or highly perceptive is giving yourself permission to do what you need to do for you. And part of that is more downtime. It's
Hmm.
getting more sleep. It's taking more breaks. It's really starting to say no more often and setting boundaries. And I know, we don't want to say no to people. We don't want to disappoint them. We want to belong. There are lots of reasons that we say yes to things that we don't really want. But this is permission to help yourself thrive so that then you can help all of the other people that you support in your life, or all of the causes that you work on, or all of the people you take care of, whatever it looks like for you. Self-care is really, really, really important. And it's more than just, getting massages or taking vacations. So
Exactly.
I would leave you with that.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Rachel, for being here and talking to us about this subject that I think a lot of ladies out there will find that they resonate with. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Angilie. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. Okay, and that is it for today's episode on awakening your inner sensory superpowers with our special guest, certified leadership and executive coach, mastermind facilitator, and author, Rachel Radway. I want to thank Rachel again for joining us today and for sharing her experience and insights on the unique gifts and challenges of high sensory perception and helping us to embrace our heightened perceptiveness to thrive both professionally and personally and further unveil our brilliance. And also thank you, you beautiful soul, for being here with me today as well. As I've mentioned before, I don't believe in coincidences, and you, bright light, were meant to be here to receive whatever it is you were meant to receive from this episode today. So keep it up, keep showing up, and making progress towards unveiling your brilliance. Now, if you're here with me live, be sure to join me in the second half of the show for Brilliant Connections, where I get to meet you and get to know you, and you're able to ask me any questions you might have from today's episode topic or the show. If you're catching this on replay, thanks so much for watching. I hope you'll check out our previous episodes as well on winwinwomen.tv/show/unveil your brilliance, as well as join me live next week. Remember, like #1 international best-selling author, spiritual teacher, and award-winning creative visionary Robert Clancy said, we all have the capacity to be a superhero. In order to become one, you just have to find your unique power or ability and exploit it for the greater good. The cape and mask are optional accessories, but a kind heart is essential. So embrace your unique powers and abilities and shine your brilliance bright light. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next week. My ladies here with me live, I'll see you in just a few seconds.